Prey. With Bethesda's review policy, it's confusing. It's not great for us. Sometimes it's not great for consumers because Prey came out on Friday, and I feel like it's everyone just biting into a jelly bean and then chewing it and trying to figure out what is the flavor here. Is this good? Should we recommend it? Where are we at? JV, you've been cramming all weekend, and you managed to beat this thing.
Yeah, I've been playing because technically, we got it a day before release.
Sure,
we got it like 8:00 Thursday morning, and I was done with it. I want to say by, I saw credits roll by Saturday midnight.
Okay.
Yeah. So
pretty good,
man. So yeah, where should we start with Prey?
What did you think of it?
No ending spoilers for me.
No ending spoilers.
I was also cramming on it all weekend. Well, not all weekend, but I was doing a lot of cramming over the weekend. But I'm being like very completionist, and I'm doing it over a stream, so there's like stream chat and stuff. So I haven't gotten to the end. So as long as there's no ending spoilers, I'm happy.
No, we're not going to talk the ending. Yeah, no.
Okay.
So here's the arc that I saw. We were streaming it on Thursday actually, and a lot of the chat had played the demo, and they weren't wowed by the first hour. I think there's some interesting elements in there, but a lot of the chat was bracing for a negative impact on this game. How did this game evolve? Where'd you end up thinking the overall quality?
Yeah, I think the demo, it's really strange because I'm actually a big fan of demos, mostly as like a throwback sort of thing, because I used to like download demos all the time on dial-up. So we're talking like Half-Life and stuff. It was great.
Yeah.
Fun times, the dark ages. So I was really excited for this, but I think that the Prey demo honestly does a bad job of showing what's special about this game, because for me and a lot of other people that I've talked to who have played it, the first 3 or 4 hours are rough. Like basically the only powers you can really get, like the majority of powers you can get in those first 3 to 4 hours are stat buffs, so like health and stuff. And there's the occasional, like you can pick up things, heavier things. But as far as like alien powers and being able to turn into like a cup and, stuff that can solve puzzles, that doesn't come along until like 2 or 3 hours after that demo. And those powers and the glue gun, the glue gun or the glue cannon are like what's special about Prey. When you have those two things together, they give you basically a huge toolbox to just play your own way through the game. So, you might come across a security office that's locked, and there are several ways to get in. You can go and find the key card if you want. You can use the glue gun if like the top of the security booth has an open roof. There's no roof on top of it or ceiling. You can just build a staircase and hop over it. You can turn into a cup and sort of get through one of the smaller openings. So there are a lot of ways to play, and you don't really get all those tools until you get a fair bit into the game.
So you just kept getting warmer and warmer on the game overall then?
Yeah, I was really rough on it in the first 3 or 4 hours, but once I got access to those powers, it became a consistently better experience. There are still some lows, like there's sort of a filler segment that I'm not a fan of that we won't get into on the show, but it's mostly really, really good, especially just how much it gives you to solve your objectives and stuff. And a lot of the side missions are great. Like I love the characters. I was talking with Kim about this earlier. Prey has the audio log storytelling bit thing that BioShock does, that System Shock does, but what makes Prey interesting is that I feel like where BioShock sort of focused on world building, engineering aspects almost, like Will or Bill or whatever his name is in BioShock, all of his audio logs are basically like, oh, this is how BioShock functioned from an engineer perspective. We got to fix all the pipes, this and that. Whereas in Prey, it's about these people and their personal lives. Like you'll come across audio tapes about 2 characters who are dating. One of the recurring themes that shows up is that these characters play like Dungeons and Dragons, or like some spinoff of Dungeons and Dragons, and you'll come across like their tabletop board game stuff, and you'll come across emails and audio logs that all tie into that. And it should be like such a small thing, like such a little small personal detail that any other game would have like, one thing dedicated to it, like an email. But it's like an entire thread that you come across over and over again that shows how close these people were, what the relationships were to each other, and so on and so forth. And that was like the strongest thing for me, is like, these aren't just NPCs, like random NPCs in other games. These are characters that you get to know.
So you're trying to play Prey like it's Tacoma?
No comment.
Well, Steve, as somebody who worked on BioShock 2 and a little bit of BioShock Infinite, right? Yeah. Not to mention Gone Home, Tacoma. What stands out to you about Prey? What's interesting about this game for your experience so far?
Well, I think that I had a kind of similar-ish experience to JV in the first hour. So context, so they released the opening hour demo, which I played for a total of 6 hours because I'm a very this is totally my kind of game, and System Shock 2 and the original BioShock and Deus Ex, the Dishonored games, these games where you really can use all these abilities you have to just fully explore every detail in these big interconnected spaces are really exciting to me. And so I had a similar kind of experience to JV, except for me, it wasn't really about like the alien powers or the additional upgrades you get. For me, when I was playing the demo, it took me like an hour or two just to get to the point where you really kind of get out into the lobby and you have access to, well, I could go to that office or up these stairs or over there, and here's this locked door. But I think if I got around to the backside, I could get in and all that kind of stuff. And then once I got to that point, I started to see how all the different systems interconnected, like turrets and mimics and the abilities you actually have, like JV was saying, the glue gun that is able to say, I can't get up on that balcony in any way except if I built a pathway up there, and then you can. And so for me, it was like after that first couple hours of just sort of stepping through the introductions of just like, here are the basics, go here, now go here, now go here. And then when I was really let loose, even though I didn't have the ability to morph or, mind control enemies or anything like that, just that really like all those different aspects clicking into place to say, oh, this is one of these, you know what I mean? Like I'm finally in like a hub. Like I really love the hub spaces, specifically like the city hubs in the new Deus Ex game. So Deus Ex Human Revolution and Deus Ex Mankind Divided, the Detroit and China and Prague city hubs. They're just like, you have this whole space that's open to you, but not like an open world. It's a very kind of like approachable, higher detail, kind of human scale, but sprawling and interconnected space. And kind of, after you get a couple hours into Prey, you start to see how all that connects, and you're able to say, I have decided I've got this quest goal, but my goal is to get up into that locked office and see what's in there, and I actually have the ability to do that. And so that's really exciting. And that's been what's really been kind of driving me through the whole game up to this point.
Yeah, I think Sean Elliott, who worked on BioShock Infinite, now he's working on Prey as a designer, he had an interesting tweet where he just said, like, obviously our goal with Prey is to say yes to the player as much as possible, which is something that we weren't quite able to do as much with BioShock as we would have wanted. So, Steve, from your experience, why is it so tough to say yes to the player as much as Prey does?
I mean, so much of it is just like complexity and density. Like when you look at something like, weirdly, one of the most recent, most direct comparisons, I think, is the new Zelda game, where it's similarly sort of like the reason it can feel so rich and that we can say, that the designers can say to the player, approach this however you want, is because they've just done a ton of very hard work to give you access to all these complex systems, and just like building the systems, making sure they don't break each other, making sure they actually support each other, making sure that they're satisfying to use, and that you aren't encouraged just to find like your one perfect ability that solves every problem and use nothing but that. It's like a difficult design overlap of just like, well, we have all these dozens of things, let's balance them all. And then B, it's like just a tech and work question of like, that's a lot. You got to make a lot, right? Like when you look at something like Prey or like System Shock 2 or like the BioShock games, they don't come together until you have this critical mass of like enough different things all going on that it has that dynamism that you feel like you really are making your own choices, as opposed to just saying, am I going to do door A or door B, that the designers have said I can pick one of these few options to move forward. It's like dense and complex enough that you're in that space and thinking of it outside of just like a handful of options and actually combining things to come up with your own solutions. But you can't do that if there's only like a few things to choose from.
Yeah, for sure. It just seems like you said, so much work to give this much freedom to players. Do you think there's the audience out there that appreciate it? It seems like the most traction Prey has for a wider audience is people saying, oh, it's kind of like BioShock in space, which I know is silly with System Shock and everything, but that seems to be like some sort of handhold for the wider community. So, Bertz, you've played a lot of this game. Do you think like if a wider fan base goes into this game expecting another BioShock-like experience, they'll enjoy it?
Maybe I don't know if it has the mainstream kind of like the one failing that this I wouldn't say failing, but the one criticism I would levy at the game systems that really isn't grabbing me is the combat.
Yeah.
And like Ken Levine, when he talks about this kind of game design, he's like, you always got to give that action player like skip the audio logs if you just want to get into the game combat. I don't know that this game can stand on that.
Why is that? Where does it fall down there?
I think it's difficult. Like you don't have a lot of ammo, which is the fallback for a lot of traditional gamers who play these kinds of games that maybe they didn't play System Shock, but they got into BioShock.
Yeah.
The combat for me, like running out of ammo all the time, having no melee when a mimic gets really close to you without having to switch to the wrench. Some of those things I think make it a little bit tougher sell.
Yeah.
But for a person like me who, I love these games, like Dishonored, I think crossed that boundary a little bit better. The first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why is that?
Yeah, well, you were an unstoppable killing force in that game. You could do amazingly crazy stuff.
Makes for better trailers
Right.
too.
Yeah.
And it's like, we have to take into account, because I was thinking that same thing with Dishonored too, but we are talking about very different fantasies. Like Dishonored, you are ostensibly an unstoppable killing machine, and your main choice is like, do I stay my hand or do I just murder everyone?
Yeah.
Whereas in Prey, you are a scientist, a brilliant scientist who can mod their body, but you're not the toughest, baddest, killer.
Yeah,
you don't start that way.
It's a thinking player's game, and I think that's why Bethesda struggled with the marketing for this, and that's why they released that demo. I really believe that they weren't sure how to sell this to a wider audience.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, like, and I'm understanding of that. I'm understanding of like, okay, this is different fantasy, but it's also a game that feels like it comes from a lineage of play your own way, and for it to not out of the gate give you, the means to fight, the monsters that you run into, it seems like a failing to me in a way. It does. It's because, someone like from BioShock, if you play BioShock, and Dishonored, you can go right out of the gate. Just if you're clever and resourceful, you can just kill your way through waves of enemies. But, I get that it's a different kind of fantasy. Yeah. And I do wish
like
the
that
combat
it is different. I do like
that.
Yeah,
I like it too, but I also wish, even that though it is different, I wish the combat was still more interesting than it is, because it never stopped feeling like throughout the entire game, even when I got access to like better abilities and stuff, that I wasn't just chipping off blocks off of a red health bar. And like that's a bummer to me. That kind of sucks.
I think some of it is a challenge, is like a genre challenge, and I think you kind of see this when you go from System Shock 2 to BioShock, or when you go from Resident Evil 1 through 3 to Resident Evil 4. I think that System Shock 2 and Prey are both very much trying to be survival horror games, which is about like, okay, you're scared of enemies, they can kill you if you're not careful, you don't have as much ammo as you would want, you aren't just like Master Chief, and can just run circles around your enemies and use all these weapons to waste them, because they want the tension of you feeling like you do have to say, am I going to use my ammo on this enemy, or am I going to try to think of a different way around it. And I think that's similar, when you look at, I don't know, Silent Hill or the early Resident Evil games or whatever, it's like, okay, the combat isn't good because it's actually sort of more of like a last resort in a way. And that's definitely not the case in Prey. But I think that when you look at the difference between like System Shock 2 and BioShock definitely has like spooky, like there's tension to it. It's like, it's not like a walk in the park game. Like it has some scares, and it's like, a very kind of like keeps you off balance kind of game. But I don't think it feels like survival horror the way that System Shock 2 does. I think part of that is because they were like, we need to cater to people who just want to like load up with ammo and go to town on enemies, and have that be their play style. And at some point, when you make that a valid play style, especially early, I think a lot of people, that'll just be the game for almost everyone, because it's the path of least resistance. So I think it's a really hard design problem of like, how do we not just make it awesome to waste on enemies right off the bat, so that that's just not the only thing that people ever do, but how do we also make this fun, because it's about combat with enemies, and we don't want to have combat that just sucks, because if you just have combat that people are like, this is bad, okay, well that doesn't do you any good either.
Right.
So I think finding that balance is a serious challenge.
I think actually I was And I agree. And I was thinking about this game a good bit when I was reviewing Prey. Was I think Resident Evil 7 actually found that combat balance, because like the combat in that game doesn't feel like the block chipping thing. Like you do have limited ammo and this and that, but it's super satisfying too. Like when you squeeze off a headshot, especially given the main character's tendency like for his arms to shake when he's aiming.
Yeah.
And I'd wish that Prey's combat was a little bit more like that, instead of like, oh, well, I'm just going to hit this guy with a wrench and watch the health bar go down a bit.
So I will say this about that as well, is that in Resident Evil 7, I think the least satisfying parts of the combat were when you were just grinding through oil creatures, right? Like the good combat in Resident Evil 7 was when you were just trying to get one of the like overpowered kind of controller enemies to just lay down for a minute so you can get away from them, or a big boss fight.
Right.
And I do think that Prey's enemy design also, like not so much how they look, but like how they act in a lot of cases. Like I think that there are some behaviors that the floor crawler mimics could do that would be more conducive to like how you first encounter them. Because like when I encounter them anyway, they generally tend to like run up and just start like hitting you in the ankles, which leads to a lot of just like stare at the floor and try to delete their hit points, which is not how like, for instance, head crabs in Half-Life are, where they tend to like keep their distance and kind of dance around back there and then like jump right towards you so you can hit them out of the air, which makes them a pretty satisfying enemy behavior, which is very different for like an enemy that's a very similar shape. So I think there's probably some stuff that could be tuned just in the like, what are the enemies like and how do they behave when I encounter them with these tools, along with just like what the player can do and how the combat is balanced and stuff.
Yeah, it feels like all of the tools that I was given, like the most satisfying things, even when it was in relationship to enemies, it was always like about stealth and not actually engaging them, like figuring out which objects are mimics. Like there was something super satisfying about, well, that cup just sort of moved. That is definitely a damn crab. And then going over there and hitting it and then seeing that, you killed it in one hit because you were clever enough to see that it was there. Like that stuff's satisfying, but to me, that's not even necessarily combat. Like, that's more of just exploration and, being prepped.
Well, yeah, and I think there's something that, with BioShock 1 especially, I think there were a lot of people who were like, well, the combat in this game isn't great. It's a great game, but like it's not like you play this to play an awesome FPS. I think there's sort of a tell there, which is that a lot of your plasmids in BioShock either are about immobilizing an enemy or like doing damage to them without actually having to like play an FPS against them. So there's a lot of either like zap them and whack them or set them on fire and then run away, which is sort of like, okay, so our design is about killing these enemies without actually having to do combat towards them. And I feel like Prey has a similar kind of thing where it's like the first thing they give you is the glue gun, which is just like, this is to freeze enemies in place so you can just kill them without having to actually fight them. So I think there's a similar kind of tension going on there in the design space.
Yeah, for sure. So Jeff Cork is also playing this game, and he's telling me the story about fighting, beyond just the mimics. There's also larger versions of the Typhoon aliens. The Nightmare, is that the big one?
Yep. The Nightmare will murder you.
That's what he said. He said like there was an area where it's like, hey, you can fight it or just try and survive for 3 minutes, and he just GoldenEyed it and just hid in a toilet and just waited for this thing to like slowly walk by the bathroom. Like, do you want to talk about some crazy experiences? What like fun moments stand out to you as like peak systems all converging in this game?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead while I think.
The one that jumps out to me right off the top of my head is I had this awesome like I'm sold moment in the demo, which was you get into this area that's like a multi-level area. So you're up on a balcony, and it's the first time you encounter one of the, I think it's called it's called something like a technophasm or something. Whatever. It's one of the floating enemies that will like grab turrets and then have the turrets shoot at you by carrying them around.
Yeah.
And so I came up towards it and I saw it and I was like, oh god, it's like floating around. And so it was floating above the balcony, so above the second floor. And it killed me a couple of times, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be smart. And I threw an EMP at it, so it disabled the turrets that would have been shooting me. And then I just took out the glue gun and just like, while it was stunned, tried to just immobilize it with the glue gun because I'm like, then I'll shoot it. But what actually happened was I shot it with the glue gun enough that it got frozen, which just caused it to fall 2 floors down to the ground and die from taking fall damage and shatter. I was like, this is beautiful. Games are a miracle.
Yeah.
So that was rad and really surprising. But like, those are the moments of that kind of emergent gameplay where it's like, you didn't see it coming. It was super surprising. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, I know exactly why that happened. Awesome.
Yeah. There's a level later on that you have to clear out that has a bunch of enemies in it. And I used a tactic that Bertz actually put into my head, because you get the ability, in the game, you get the ability to basically manufacture any item that's in the game that you can use. So ammo, even like the neuromods, which are your level currency. Later on, you get the ability to manufacture as many of those as you want, as long as you have the resources.
What? Okay.
Which I've done a lot of.
Yeah. So one of the
I
things
did that for 3 hours yesterday.
Jesus Christ.
So one of the things that I did was I just manufactured a bunch of turrets and I set them up in a room, and I had to hack all of them, because one of the interesting things that one of the things I like about neuromods is that there's some emergent storytelling that happens with your upgrades, because there are narrative consequences for using the neuromods.
Sure.
Morgan is, well, in my case, as she used more, she becomes less human, so the turrets will fire on you because they sense that you're not human.
Got it.
But you can hack them. You can like sneak up behind them and hack them, make them not do that. But anyway, so I got like 4 of them, and I stuck them in a room that was like T-bone shaped. And then there was this hallway filled with like phantoms and stuff, which are like the mid-level soldier sort of type one they have to take out, and they have like fire abilities and telekinesis. And so I would just run into the cargo hold where they were, and then run back into and like lead 3 or 4 of them to their deaths.
It's just orcs must die at that point?
Yeah. It was really fun. Like, it was just, because it does sound kind of, saying it like that sounds kind of boring, and an orcs must die away, but it was really interesting to see them like come in there, and they would actually put up a fight too. Like, they took out 2 of those turrets, and I would have to go and make more. But it was just fun to like do that and not really use up any of my own ammo.
Yeah. By the way,
Just lay an ambush. Yeah.
Dantec, just you seem confused. We've covered this on the podcast before. JV says turrets. No one can quite figure out why he says turrets, but
I
didn't want to say anything. I'm just like,
right. No one wants to be rude, but JV, that's
the
a weird
first
way
time
to
you
say
said it, I
turrets.
was just like,
Sorry.
And then the second time, I just couldn't help myself. I was like, what? Wait, what?
I've known people in the past who have pronounced turrets. You're not the only person, JV, in the world who says turrets.
I'm the brotherhood of people who say weird shit.
Probably the only professional writer.
There was somebody else that I knew who pronounced vehicles vehicles. So,
was it a 3-year-old, Steve?
I want to meet this person. I want to be their best friend.
No, you guys, it would be like a matter antimatter thing. You guys would both
Your tongues would explode. So I'm just
listening to you would explode.
I'm still trying to figure out, is this just the game exactly that System Shock fans have wanted for a long time? Like, what doesn't it nail?
A lot of it, and
I would say that it is, personally.
Yeah.
Like, as someone who played, System Shock 2, whatever, in my freshman year of college or something, and what I feel like, I haven't finished Prey. Maybe it turns super bad. But like, it feels to me like it has the level of polish and accessibility and presentation of BioShock while retaining the like systems complexity of System Shock 2, which is amazing. And yeah, I really do like Javy was saying, all the characterization, all of the like actual characters that you meet, who you speak to, who have different perspectives and stuff. So like the crew feels more vibrant and present in a way than a lot of than even in System Shock 2, where they were all dead. And you got audio diaries and you got to know them. But something really interesting about Prey is every single crew member on the station, every corpse that you find has a unique name. And then when you encounter some of them who are alive, you're like, oh, you made it. Like, you don't encounter a living character for a long time. Sorry, spoilers. But then when you do, you're like, oh, it's not just all going to be dead bodies with names. There's still like people here, and I get to like build more of an identity of who this group was and what's happened to them in a way that I think really adds a lot to the experience.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I mean, I tend to agree that it's more of a spiritual successor to System Shock 2 than even BioShock was. But I feel like a lot of the things that BioShock streamlined, like not really having an inventory, weren't necessarily a bad thing. And returning to what is essentially System Shock 2, there are some annoyances there as far as inventory management goes, and it's really hard for me to get past how rough those first couple of hours are. Like, eventually I did, but man, it's rough. It's really, really rough. But once that game hits its stride, and when it's firing on all cylinders, It's really good.
Like rough to the point. I know Suriel is playing on easy. Would you recommend people start on easy then, just to get past?
Yeah,
that
if you've
section?
never played like System Shock 2 or something, I would recommend playing on easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, I
will
don't think
say
there's
on
any
the flip
shame
side-
in it. Oh, sorry,
Oh, yeah.
Steve.
No, I will say on the flip side, I've only played it on hard, and I think that hard mode in Prey is a better experience than like hard mode in BioShock, for instance. I think that because like in BioShock, more of the time, more of the experience of playing on hard was basically just that enemies became more of just like bullet sponges. And Prey, I haven't really felt that way. I felt like, okay, this is challenging. I'm glad that I have to be careful and like manage my resources, because I feel like if this game was easier for me, I wouldn't get as much satisfaction out of how many systems they give you to deal with this stuff. But I've made games like this. I'm very experienced with the context. So I acknowledge that this is unique probably to people who have like a lot of background with playing these kinds of things and replaying them and knowing them in and out.
Right, and you can also like toggle it anytime, so it might be more of an experimenting thing. It's not like, oh, well, I selected this at the beginning, so I'm locked into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's probably not a fun game if you put it on hard or even normal and you just keep seeing game over screens. Like, no reason to put yourself through that if you're not actually enjoying it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, hey, speaking of working on similar games, Steve, are there any moments in this game that make you think of Tacoma or make you rethink Tacoma or appreciate because of your work on Tacoma?
I mean, if there's anything that makes me rethink Tacoma, it's a little late. We're going to ship soon, so sorry. I will. So a few things that are really interesting about playing this game right now are it's interesting seeing a game that comes from some similar foundations and reference points, but that is much more faithful to like adhering to them and kind of modernizing them. So it is cool and interesting to say like, oh, okay, you can make this kind of thing now and make it good and make it like have all the stuff in it. Because, from our perspective on Tacoma, we definitely have inspirations from System Shock 2, which is, abandoned space station, personal access to who the crew members were, and we're kind of, at least one semi-reference point is like the ghost scenes that you see in System Shock 2 or BioShock, but like making it a core mechanic of like, move through the scenes and kind of engage with them more. But we're like focusing very much on those aspects of the experience and then trying to build them out from there. But something that's really, really interesting, super interesting, and this is a little bit of spoilers, but it's early spoilers and it's not like plot twist spoilers, it's just a thing that happens. There's the part relatively early on when you get into Dr. Calvino's office and you turn on the looking glass display that's in the center of the room, and it's the 3 monitors that are kind of in a column, and you turn it on and you're moving around the column, and through each of the screens you can see the room that you're in at an earlier time when people were in it doing things that have left it in the state that it's in, and you can like see through one screen that Dr. Calvino is like looking over his shoulder to see what's he seeing, and you go look in the other direction, it's his lab assistant like leaving, and he's looking to see if she's left yet so he can do something secret. And that's like very, very kind of the core experience of being inside an AR scene in Tacoma, of kind of being able to say, like, oh, I'm here now, but I'm also kind of here then, and I can see it from angles that other people couldn't see, and I'm putting all those pieces together. And I really like that sequence in Prey. So if anything, that made me feel like, oh, okay, good, this is fun. Great.
Arkane proved it for us.
That's what our whole game is about, so I'm glad I like that, because there's a whole bunch of everything we're making.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to see that as kind of like a parallel, and to get to have like a glimpse of that experience in that scene.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else anybody wants to get off their chest about Prey?
The music's awesome.
Yeah, the music's really
yeah.
good.
Gordon,
Music's
the
fantastic.
same
I
guy
love
who
the
did
soundtrack.
Doom and I think Wolfenstein as well, right?
Oh,
Yep.
really?
Mick
He's just
Gordon.
the go-to Bethesda guy?
Yeah.
He's a Michael Giacchino for Bethesda now?
Yeah, full-time. I mean, he's a full-time employee of, I guess, Bethesda or id or whatever. The thing that's really interesting is when you go outside, like all the like guitar music is just so like low-key and good, and then it's like, oh, by the way, this is the guy who made the music for Doom,
I
which
know.
is
I know.
bananas, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
Like, he's
Wolfenstein had a lot of
fantastic
that too,
Mhm.
like sort of low-key guitar music that's really good.
Yeah, for sure. So, JB, we haven't said it yet. You gave it a what?
8.25.
There we go. Recommend it to that hardcore crowd and maybe beyond.
Yeah, I recommend it to the hardcore crowd with pretty much no caveats. For people who like blasting their way through games and are hoping to do this, treat it like a Call of Duty experience, that's not going to happen. At least not until much later in the game. So just be aware of that. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
The only last thing that I want to throw in is since I've been streaming it, I have friends that work at Arkane. The lead level designer of Prey was a level designer on BioShock 2 with me, and he was a level designer on the first Dishonored game. And some other people at the studio I know. And so he has been in chat a little bit on my streams and kind of giving me some, kind of insider, dev lore, oh, this was this person's level or whatever. And something that I find really cool for people who are interested in the lineage and maybe are longtime Deus Ex or System Shock fans, or just kind of are digging back into what those games are all about. Something that's really cool to me anyway, as a developer, is that many of the level designers on Prey were level designers on the original Thief games and the original Deus Ex, and have been working, at Looking Glass and Ion Storm and other studios that were making the foundational games in this genre, and are still, making what we're playing now and bringing forward that direct experience through all of those games. As someone who is simply inspired by System Shock 2 and Deus Ex and Thief, and is trying to kind of, maintain that design outlook on things, it's cool to know that there are people who are like, oh yeah, I made, whatever, the Illuminati base in Deus Ex, and I also made, whatever, Cargo Bay in Prey, and it just got released this year, and they know their stuff, and I feel like there's something really cool about that being part of why I think the game is so good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bizarre thing that it got such a big budget in 2017, and it's going to be one of those games where 5 years from now, when people are complaining about how many sequels there are and Destiny 8's coming out or whatever, people are going to be like, why don't they make games like that reboot of Prey? That was back when the industry was alive and we took risks, damn it. This is it. This is the risk.
Yeah, it definitely feels, sort of, when I finished it, I was like, well, that's Far Cry 2 as hell. In the a lot of this is rough, but when it's really going, it's really good, and it gives you so much to play with, and I love it.
So you're saying at the end of the year we can have a whole category in the magazine?
Yeah, what game is most like Far Cry 2?
Yeah, top 5 Far Cry 2s, and it's just Breath of the Wild and Prey. Got it. Well, hey Steve, thank you so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's great to chat with you.
Yeah.
And have a good rest of your podcast.
Oh, right. We hope we will. We hope to see Tacoma at E3.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that far off. We're still finalizing plans.
Don't think about it.
See you guys there.
Don't worry about it.
Okay,
Don't think
sounds
about
good.
it.
Take care, man. Good to talk to you.
All right.
Later,
See you guys. Have a good one.
See ya.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can click right here if you want to subscribe and listen to the audio version of the full show. Full episodes air every Thursday, and they feature Game Informer editors sitting around talking about the biggest reviews, previews. We talk about exclusive impressions of Game Informer's cover stories. We have long-form developer interviews, everything that's great in gaming. So every Thursday, be sure to check it out.